Psychological health and safety is an issue for anyone who works in any industry where there are other humans involved in any way, including those that advocate for occupational health and safety itself. We'll talk with the founders of a new community designed to be a safe place and a safe space for those who advocate for safety. Up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each episode, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk Psych Health and Safety.
Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. While it's difficult to determine when safety became a profession, the earliest records of safety-related standards go back as far as 4000 BC, when Egyptian warriors, embalmers, and weapons manufacturers had laws to do their job and to avoid accidents given to them by the pharaoh. The first global effort focused on workers' safety occurred in 1919 when the International Labor Organization was formed. More contemporarily, in 2017, the International Network of Safety and Health Professional Organizations signed a commitment to improve OHS professional and practitioner capabilities called the Singapore Accord. In 2023, a unique effort to support individuals in the safety profession and others interested in safety called the Safeopedia Community was formed. In this episode, we're privileged to have the two most responsible for forming the community as our guests. So let's start with an introduction from our guest by our guest with this question. Who is Jamie Young?
Whew, starting with the easy questions. That's what I like. Well, first and foremost, I'm a happy father. I'm a husband. I am a non-professional, love sports athlete, love to play sports, watch sports. I'm maybe overly competitive at pretty much anything you can throw at me. Love losing, though, not always winning. So, love to learn, love to learn from mistakes. Winning's always better, but losing is okay too. Love to work hard, love to play hard, love to spend time with my family, love the outdoors. We chatted 3 years ago, moved down to Costa Rica from Canada. So that's been nice. More tennis in the warm weather than in the minus 30 degrees Celsius. So that's me. Been in construction most of my life, since my early 20s. That's been the sector I grew up in northern Alberta, in the oil and gas sector. And yeah, I was usually back in the day, focused on cost management, and now more on the safety side. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, similar question. Who's Scott Colbert?
Yeah, well, I'm similarly father, husband, two great kids, pretty active, like to be outdoors and running, biking, hiking, camping, those sorts of things. And yeah, like Jamie was talking about, love to, work hard, throw myself into projects, and but definitely like to hang out, cut loose, and kind of be myself with my friends and family. So that's my quick summary.
Right on. I'm terrible with names. It's Cuthbert.
Cuthbert, yeah.
Cuthbert.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm terrible with names. I generally when we when I get together with people, I always ask people their names, and then I tell them I'm probably not going to remember them anyway. and we're going to go first names because we kind of always do. So,
nice.
So for both of you, Scott, we'll start with you on this one. When you hear psychological health and safety, what pops to mind when you hear that?
Yeah, for me, it's I'm really excited that it's become a topic of discussion as of late, because I think for me, it's really just, it's feeling safe. It's feeling comfortable, kind of being yourself, speaking your mind, being accepted by people around you, and everybody having a positive, kind of a constructive approach to things. And it's easy, I think, to take for granted, speaking from my personal experience, white guy, tall, athletic, those sorts of things. You go into social settings and you bring some confidence with you, and you kind of convey that, and you get accepted, and that's sort of self-fulfilling, but other people didn't necessarily have the same experience, and I think, the criticisms or the kind of ignoring people, or talking over top of people, or making comments that erode confidence, it's self-fulfilling as well. And so I think, we need to really recognize that even though it's not intentional, we are alienating people. We are making people feel uncomfortable. We're kind of stealing their confidence away, when we really should be building them up and making everybody feel comfortable and confident to come in and speak their mind and be themselves. So.
Sure. Jamie, your thoughts. What does psychological health and safety mean to you?
Yeah, I think it kind of means everything. I think the focus, the easy focus is PPE. What's the hazard? Toolbox talk. That's been my life for 25 years. But the reality is everywhere you go, and every job you're doing, and every conversation you're having, you're up here. You're up here before you get to work. You're up here at work, after work. You kind of can't get away from yourself. And we've all got this narrative and the experience, whether it's right or wrong. We've all got something going on. And nobody, not only do I feel that nobody knows what's really going on in someone else's life, quite frankly, many of us, and I'm speaking for myself, I don't know what's going on in my own life. That narrative, all of a sudden you stop and listen to that self-talk. You're like, hey man, shut up. So I think it's kind of everything. I think that we're kind of, like Scott said, we're at the first baby step of this whole awareness, right? All of a sudden bringing to the light that this is something. We are, if you can be safe all day long, but if you're not taking care of the psychological part of it, it doesn't matter how much PPE you have or how many toolbox talks you've been to, you're at risk. So I think that it's kind of everything. It's the most important thing.
Yeah. Wow. There's rarely a textbook answer for this question. That's why I tend to ask it, to get people's perspectives, because while there are some folks out there who could rattle off so in my research, I found almost a dozen different definitions of psychological safety, of psychosocial safety. I mean, it kind of, they get kind of smushed together. They are actually different, but in probably 9 or 10 different countries have these different kind of views of the concept. But in the end, I don't know that it matters that they're slightly different. I think it matters that we're thinking about how important it is to consider what's going on, James, to your point, what's going on in people's head, not just what's going on their head, but what's going on in their head. So we'll focus a lot more on the helmet and all that type of stuff, but what they're thinking about and how they're feeling at the time. And I'm also not here to suggest that one is more important than the other. I mean, I can feel safe all I want. And if you put me in a environment where there's, chemicals or, a wet floor and I don't have, the proper footwear, I may have come in feeling well, and now I don't because of the physical environment. So they're both important. I just think we don't give enough attention to the emotional, psychological kind of side of that discussion. So a little, let's go in the Wayback Machine a little bit. And so how did you really get interested in safety specifically, kind of spending more time, because we all come to this from different, I don't know anyone who was born a safety person. I really don't. There might be someone. I've met that person who was born in the crib and they said, look, you're going to be a wonderful safety person. Our parents, people around us, whoever, probably wanted us to be something else and not safety interested. So when did safety become an interest of yours? And Jamie, we'll start with you on that one. What do you think? When did it become a thing for you?
Yeah, great question. A lot of it has to do with Scott ultimately, but being in construction, just being around it, oil and gas, we're in the oil sands. It is heavy machinery. There is every known risk, pinch points, crush, slash, just you name it. It is about the worst environment that you could be in. And after 25 years, you've kind of been a part of it all. You've been a part of people going down with, H2S exposure and people being crushed, and there's another death and, injuries galore. And you just, we were always focused on, my experience was on the cost management side. And it was always interesting to me that everyone was always about on time, on budget, right? You always heard, and then there was the mantra of safety first. Like that was always the mantra. Every company I worked for, every oil and gas facility. But the real mantra, the reality of the situation was that the money was the most important. And we all knew it wasn't, right? Everyone knows, like, hey, what's more important, the money or the safety of the people? And the easy answer is the safety of the people. But the actions weren't following the mantra. And so it was always interesting to me. And then I don't want to steal Scott's thunder, but when Scott said, hey, and we were working together in a software company for cost management, but when Scott said, hey, I have this idea, Safeopedia, I said, I'm in, because I felt in my heart of hearts that it is the most important thing. It is the only thing more important than money, and we got to shine a light on it. So let's do it. So that's how I've always been interested in safety, and Scott kind of kicked me over the line to.
Yay! Okay, Scott, what's your story? How did you end up being safety interested?
Yeah, well, I like the Wayback Machine and talking about how nobody was born safety, because I think that, and I'd like, to put this out there as an informal poll and, love to hear people's feedback. But, I think if we reflect on our childhood, teenage years, those sorts of things, like, definitely I always wanted to look out, for my friends and family and make sure people were safe and step up when, talking about psychological safety, like step up when somebody's being bullied or picked on and stand up for people who maybe had trouble standing up for themselves. And again, always, it's much to Jamie's, chagrin. I have a difficult time saying no. So I'm always volunteering for things in the community and trying to help out, people who maybe don't have the same opportunities that I have. So I think that, I'm putting it out there to say how many other people who have found their way into safety didn't realize it was a profession, didn't realize it was something that they could pursue, and kind of just their nature kind of found their way to safety. Because I think that, like my teenage buddies used to make fun of me because I'd be putting that seatbelt on before I'd start the car, and they'd be like, you're like, are you paranoid? And it's like, well, if I could put this on and, reduce the risk of serious injury by 85%, it's not an inconvenience for me. And I'm going to make sure everybody else in the car is wearing their seatbelt too, right? So I think there's a little bit of maybe human nature involved in becoming, a safety person or involved in safety. But, definitely, like Jamie said, we had the cost management. We were in construction. Safety is always a big thing. I always gravitated towards the safety folks, having lunch, coffee breaks, talking about what they were doing and feeling that there's a greater calling out there than managing the dollars on a project. And definitely safety sort of called to me. And when I had the opportunity, I volunteered on the Construction Owner Association Safety Committee. Again, can't say no. So I volunteered on that committee, and I sat around that table with VPs, directors of health and safety from some of the largest owners, energy companies in North America, some of the largest contractors, and having a bit of a technology background, realizing they were struggling with adopting technology and using it to their benefit. And that's really where, like Jamie said, where the idea for Safeopedia came from, was like, I'm not going to do a better inspection. I'm not going to provide better confined space training, but we can help try to create a rallying point, for health and safety folks, and help make their lives a little easier by bringing content and education, to one place. So that's really how I got involved in safety. But I think, to your point, David, it's sort of it's always calling to, people who are listening,
Right. Yeah. Most of the folks that I know that have a strong interest in safety have some particular thing that happened, or a series of things that happened that really got them interested. Some personal, some watching other people. I mean, I share often that I started in the fire rescue service, and I saw my first colleague die on the job. I was 22 years old. And that's the part they didn't really tell me about. Because nobody, that's not something, you don't have a conversation about that. And at the time, the fire rescue service in the United States was losing about 130 people a year. And based on the way we did things at the time, the likelihood of something bad happening was actually pretty high. But that's just not the conversation that was had. So when it stared me in the face, it kind of changed my life, and I continue to think about it like all the time. Most of the things I do are still in service of not having that happen to somebody else. And now this conversation about psychological health and safety helps me connect the fact that there was an environment that didn't allow us to speak up when things were going on. And it's not because they're bad people either. It's because everybody was baked in the same cake and, hung out in the same quarters and that type of thing. So everybody kind of thought alike, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to stay. So, this idea about something, from a safety from a physical perspective is something that is familiar to a lot of people. But I found that there's some emotional challenges with just trying to be a safety person. So if you're trying to be, Scott, to your point, you're trying to be the person who talks about safety and the folks around you aren't really interested. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like being the safety person, sometimes in environments where people weren't as interested as you? How's that been for you? What's your experience been that way?
Yeah, well, I think, looking back and I mean, like I said at the beginning, I'm glad things are changing. I don't think they can change quick enough, but it's almost been, you have the safety people on site. They're kind of doing their job. They don't necessarily get the respect that they deserve, and they don't have the authority that they need in a lot of cases to implement their mandates as far as keeping people safe and compliant on the job site. But definitely, again, speaking specifically about the construction industry is there's sort of this attitude, the alpha male kind of attitude, cowboy attitude. And if you are a worker, if you are on site and you're trying to point out some of these things, like it's not just that people ignore you or they're not interested, but you'll often find there's some sort of hazing, penalty, punitive, teasing, some harmful disrespect that you can receive on the site if you're trying to speak up. And so I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent or get too personal, but I mean there's been horrible stories that I've seen on the site of people being treated in really, really horrendous sort of ways because they were trying to speak up. They didn't feel physically safe, and trying to share that on a job site just resulted in sort of negative consequences, I'm sure, beyond what they ever anticipated. And it just sort of again, self-fulfilling and perpetuating, because 20 other people on site see that happening and they're certainly not going to speak up or share their thoughts or ideas or concerns. And so it just, like I say, perpetuates and gets worse. And I'm optimistic that we can start to change that. So
absolutely. Jamie, your thoughts? Any experience like that in the oil and gas industry? Of course not. That never happens there, right? No,
oil and gas is the epitome of wonderful. Yeah, I agree with Scott. I think it's historically been the alpha male. Psychological safety. It's difficult because it's invisible. I think to me is the biggest challenge, and from a safety person's perspective, I'm not a safety professional, but I've known many, many, many safety professionals. Being in the office or the trailer, I'm always sitting right beside them. And so, we're getting to know each other. We're chums, we're friends for the whole project. And more often than not, the safety person has not ever been a worker in my experience, in most cases. And there comes a very difficult responsibility of, okay, so all the rules, the safety rules. How should the worker stay safe? What do they need to do to be in compliance? And that's great, right? That's all the technical things. And then now you got to put yourself in a safety person's shoes, and you're going to go out there, and not only are you not a peer really to the worker who has been working for 20 years, knows how to build or do whatever they're doing, and you're out there saying, hey, you're not wearing the proper PPE, and you're not doing the job right, and you can't be safe and all of a sudden, the safety cop is now out there, and not only are you not a peer, you don't really know their job. Now you're trying to tell them what to do. You're probably don't have experience in or training in leadership or communication, because Scott touched on it. You're now the safety person. Like, hey, you can do safety. Sure, I can do safety. So you might know all the rules, and that's sort of where I think most safety people in my experience in the past have gravitated towards. It is that what I can see and PPE and know the hazard and what do I do to keep people in compliance. But all of a sudden, you are now a coach, a leader, a supervisor. You're all these things, and it's pretty tricky. And you don't know. Again, back to psychological. You don't know what that person's going through at home. You don't know if they've got addictions or problems in the family or someone. You have no idea what's going on, and you're rolling in like you're in charge of safety. And a lot of times that doesn't go so well. So yeah, pile it all on, and are there challenges in oil and gas? And I'd say there are infinity problems in oil and gas, especially when it comes to being a safety person. So
right.
Yeah, that's my 2 cents Canadian.
Well, let me validate that even in sectors where you probably do know what's going on. So my first opportunity to be a safety officer, I was a fire captain. I'd been on the job for a bunch of years and got promoted. What I didn't really know was the technical aspect of safety, because I didn't have these certifications, didn't really study it, but I knew the job, and they gave me the role. And that actually got me on this quest to want to learn more about it. But even in situations where people's technical expertise may be there, it's as if organizations and industries and cultures say safety is important until somebody actually does it. And particularly when they try to do it in ways that are a little bit different from everybody else. You got to get the pushback. And again, both of you mentioned it. The reality is most organizations are about money first and people second. And I don't think they should be. Right. But if you give folks the choice, that's the one they tend to pick is, well, how much does it cost? And that even goes into the public sector. How much is it going to cost us? We're going to have to raise taxes, blah, 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 blah. But what about the human beings? And ultimately, when we do focus on the human beings, we're going to save you money later anyway. So based on either these experiences or something happened that two of you all get together and come up with this idea about something called Safeopedia. So again, back in the Wayback Machine again. So what is Safeopedia? What does that mean? Jamie, I'll start with you and I'll end up with Scott. What is that?
No, I want to defer to Scott. It's his idea, Hey, sure, I was in when he asked, but I'm going to defer to Scott because it was his baby up in the old mainframe. So
okay,
I'll definitely defer.
Scott,
I'll go next. I'll correct all of his mistakes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was driving home. I was in a 3-hour drive, 2.5-hour drive from home. I'd been at a Construction Owner Association Safety Committee meeting, and a little kind of mini conference got together. We were talking about all these ideas, and again, I just as a member of the committee who had a different perspective, I just kept hearing safety professionals, again, senior people in large organizations saying, I wish there was one place I could go to get the information that I need. I spend so much time, trying to track down what the current legislation is, what the current guidelines are, what the owner wants, what the general contractor wants. And I'd love to spend more time, in the field keeping people safe and less time behind my desk looking for this information. And that's really driving home. I was about halfway home and Safeopedia popped into my head, and I couldn't get home or couldn't get to the office fast enough. I didn't go home. I went straight to the office and registered the domain name and, filed the trademark, with their lawyer and just had that idea. And I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead, in questions, but it was, we were asking earlier who Scott Cuthbert is. I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I want to, chase shiny objects, and the new thing is always the best thing. But with Safeopedia, and I, started a couple of businesses, jumped into different things over the years. But with Safeopedia, I just felt like it was this really good idea. We could make a real impact with it, and it sort of germinated that idea for a couple of years, and socialized it with peers and colleagues and people in the industry. And everybody I spoke to kind of took ownership of what Safeopedia means. It meant something to everybody, even without me kind of explaining it in great detail. If you were a hockey mom, it meant, proper hockey equipment, head protection, concussion protocol, and if you were a construction worker, it meant, proper training, proper compliance, proper legislation. So like I said, it germinated for a few years, and it realized that it resonated with everybody that I spoke to. And then, Jamie and I were working together, and I think his story was wrong, because he said I told him about the idea for Safeopedia, and he said he was in. I don't even think I got through the whole entire word. I think I said, I have this idea for Safo, and he said, I'm in, before I even finished Opedia. So,
okay.
yeah, so that's really where the idea came from, and what we wanted to be is that rallying point for folks out in the field who need to get to that information, quickly without wondering if they have the right information, or spending days and days, searching for it.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
Sure. Jamie, so does he have this right, or what parts can you fill in that he may have missed?
Yeah, that's basically right. I mean, as right as he can be. Yeah, I think the one part that I would say it did germinate for a little while. We were both in our cost management software world, and in fact we were competitors for quite a while, and then we ended up, I knew of Scott, I saw him maybe to here and there, and then we ended up partnering. And then when he brought the idea, I was like, yeah, that, again, that's the only thing more important than money is safety. So let's do it. And then, and then Corey Jansen of Investopedia fame was also our third partner. And he had done many other, the Investopedia and a bunch of other Opedia style publications. And so that really got the ball rolling, I would say, from a getting started standpoint. We didn't know anything about publications, and, we were trying to do it one day per week kind of thing. And as many people have heard the expression, you just got to burn the boats. So
I haven't heard that one.
It might be a Tony Robbins or a Les Brown thing, but
right.
You just got to dive in and do it. If you're going to do something that you're passionate about, and everyone's at different perspectives, but we had an opportunity to really dive in and go full time. Hard days, months, years, when you're in startup mode, and Scott always says shiny objects, and, sometimes they're not that shiny in the beginning. And so there was a lot of sacrifice and exciting moments. And as hard as it was, I don't think there's a day where it's been a second thought or a second guess. Like, are we doing the right thing? It's always been that higher calling. We're doing it for other people to stay safe, not for people to save money or get rich. Right. So it has been quite a different perspective. That's maybe 10 years ago. I don't know, 8 years ago.
Wow.
And I want to throw in there as well, the original idea. Now I'm stealing Scott's words, so I'm paraphrasing, but the original idea was that rallying point for safety people to come together. But we had that opportunity with the Opedia model to be a publication. And so, again, I'm probably jumping ahead to the questions, but we are now coming full circle where we had the online forward kind of one-way communication of a publication, like an online magazine, where we weren't engaging with the safety professionals. We weren't engaging with the workforce. And so 4 years ago, again, Scott and his shiny ideas had the idea for Safety Connect. Hey, let's do an online virtual conference. And this was pre-COVID. I want to give Scott full props for coming up with an online conference before COVID even happened. And on the record, I said, that is the stupidest idea that I've ever heard. It'll never work. And here we are 4 years later, 3 awesome, virtual conferences later, and that was the turning point. We were now engaging in the conversation, and it's everything. And you said the word people. People, it's got to start with people, and that's sort of what we found after this whole publication thing has been going on. It's been great, and we're fortunate, but now we're getting back to the harnessing of the collective genius, as Scott says, and yeah, it's even more exciting. So it's getting better by the minute.
Yeah, it's an interesting thread that runs between, most of these conversations, that there's an interest in safety, but there's an interest in safety that is not necessarily focused on money first. I heard a while back that there are 3 reasons that people engage in safety activities. The first reason, and it isn't in order to me, first reason is that they feel that they have an ethical, moral responsibility to engage, and it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And there are those that believe that safety is the right thing to do. It doesn't matter about all this other stuff. I mean, if folks were to look at my banner on LinkedIn myself, safety's not everything. Safety's the only thing, at least for some of us. It is. Because if you are, first of all, if you're killed, it doesn't really matter. You can't take it with you. And if you're injured, severely enough, there's not enough money to fix it. Yeah. So safety is a moral and ethical responsibility. But the second reason why some people do it, it's not really a moral thing, but it will save you a crap ton of money. It will. I mean, there is no question. So an injury to an employee at your average business, when they have to see a doctor, is going to cost the company $42,000, according to the National Safety Council. They have to see a doctor, $42,000, and that depends on. That's certainly not, in New York or California or Florida or someplace in a big city where the doctors and the healthcare is going to cost more. So let's say $42,000, and if you kill them, it's going to cost $1.3 million. So not killing people and not injuring people will save you money. And the third reason is because you have to. Yeah. And because of the structure of laws, across North America, some people have to and some people don't. We can say everybody does, but that's not true. It's not true. It is not true. In the United States, we have the Occupational Safety and Health Act. It doesn't apply to everybody. It doesn't. It doesn't apply to state, local governments for certain because of the 10th Amendment. So as a worker in most of my life in the public sector, I didn't get the same level of protection that a private sector worker would, because OSHA won't make a local government treat their people who, have a safety program. And many of them don't. Many of them don't. So again, back to this point, that's the thread here this really is about safety, and it's about the safety of people. The safety of things comes later, but the safety of people is more important than the safety of things the vast majority of the time. It really is, particularly when we're talking about severity. And that also includes safety interested people, which is another thread I've tried to drop in here, is that not everybody has a credential, not everybody has a certification, but there are people who are safety interested. I have an interest in safety, and and sometimes it's hard to find other people who, you come across as nerdy, you come across as too compliance focused, you come across as all these things, and it's hard to find a place to be able to say the quiet safety part out loud. Yeah. And so recently, you all come up with another idea. I'm not sure who had this one first, about forming this thing called a Safeopedia Community. So who wants to tell me a little bit about that idea? Okay. Back to Scott again. Another shiny object idea, but
yeah. Well, and Jamie touched on it, but that was really the initial idea for Safeopedia, was to be an online community for safety professionals, or safety, safety minded people, safety interested people. I like the way you said that, David.
Yeah.
Because as you know, I mean, you can read all the guidelines, you can read all the legislation. When you get out to the job site, or the shop floor, there's a whole bunch of moving parts, and a lot of times it's not obvious, how to interpret, legislations or best practices. And so that experience sharing, that being able to, hey, call an expert or talk to a buddy, I think is invaluable. And that was really the initial idea for Safeopedia, was more of harnessing the collective genius, bringing safety people together, to collaborate. One of the things that I heard over the years was, we're really great at developing best practices, but we really suck at implementing them. And so it's like, can we come together, as a community and become more effective and more efficient as safety people? And so we, like Jamie mentioned, when we met Corey, he said, I don't know about building out an online community, but I do know about building out a publication. And if we do that, then we can, build a brand, build an audience, build a bit of a reputation, and then we can see where it goes from there. So we kind of started small with the publication. Like Jamie said, we did Safety Connect 2020, 2021, 2022, and again next week, 2023. And it's really been, I'll just pause for a second and I'll say, David, if I came to Jamie with the idea for Safeopedia, came to him with the idea for Safety Connect, do you think he'd give me credit and, just agree with everything else I come up with? No, he still still has to challenge every idea I bring forward, even though, had those two good ones. But
only because I know who has to implement it.
Yeah.
Good idea.
But doing Safety Connect, coming together as a community and interacting and engaging, it's really been the most rewarding thing that we've done. And the feedback that we received when we did the post-conference surveys and we interview exhibitors and we interview attendees, they say, hey, why can't we do this more regularly? Why do we have to wait once a year to do this? It's online. It's very accessible. It's very convenient. Why can't we do this more often? So we've spent the last, I say the royal we, we've spent the last year looking at platforms. We're changing our conference platform this year to one that is more community focused, where we can keep it up and running for the entire year and hopefully keep those conversations going, be there to support each other and start to make, valuable connections. And I know there's Facebook and LinkedIn and there's other platforms out there, but there's so much noise, and there's so much salesy stuff, spammy stuff, self-promotion stuff. We wanted to, again, back to psychological safety, we wanted to create a place that's inclusive, welcoming, safe and self-moderated to some extent as well, so that, we can kind of weed out the people who aren't trying to add value and they're just trying to extract value, and really focus on people who are there to support and help each other. Because I think, again, I'm getting on my soapbox, David, but the people who've contributed the most to Safety Connect's success are the ones that say they receive the most benefit from being part of that community. Right. If you sit quietly on the sidelines, you'll get your CEUs and you'll see some cool sessions and some interesting topics. But if you jump in and you participate and you interact and you ask questions and you answer questions, you'll walk away, with much more value than you've given. And right. So that's the community that we're trying to create.
Sure. Jamie, your thoughts on the community that's emerging?
Yeah, I love it. I love the fact, and we joke, Scott's ideas and that kind of thing. But the thing that I like about it the most is, and Scott touched on it, social media has become this. I always use my thumb. It's this giant, endless feed of stuff and noise, and a lot of it is good, right? It's not all spam, it's not all sales. There's a lot of great conversations, and you just keep scrolling, and just kind of dialing it back to safety professionals and the sharing of information. A Google search with some effort will point you to the right legislation, the technical details of it, right? The rules. But where the challenge comes in is the interpretation or the implementation of the rule or a best practice. And it's that experience of the safety professional, at least in my experience, is really that level that's missing. So we're trying to capture that, where when there is a conversation going on, instead of just going into the ether or the black hole of LinkedIn never ending feed, can we organize that information? Can we have conversations around the information? Oh yeah, I asked a question and David answered it and Scott answered it and, Sally answered it. And 9,000 people said, you know what? Sally's answer is the best answer, or there's iterations of that answer. And so, because certainly someone is going to ask the same question as someone else. And why reinvent the wheel? Why start a whole new conversation? But now it's in the community. You can search for it. It's organized. It's categorized to bring you that information. And you can have a conversation around it. And you can also maybe reach out to Sally and say, hey, Sally, I saw you answered this. Do you mind having a conversation? And of course, hey, yeah, you're in the community too. Let's have a chat. Let's get on a Zoom call, whatever it might be. And learning from that experience firsthand. And maybe she's in your industry and maybe she's not. But I think to me, that's the biggest thing about the community is, seems like there's a theme here, people, but finding a PDF of the rule doesn't help me or the worker when I've got a situation or when I want to learn something new, whether I'm 20 years in the industry. It's almost worse if you're brand new. Right. Where do you go to? Right. You can't fire, no pun intended, drink out of the fire hose. Right. But, how do you find out from the experienced personnel instead of trying to wade through all the technical documentation? And I think that's where the community is going to really fill a gap in the industry. So.
Yeah, I like both of you. I enjoy shiny objects. I realize that they start off shiny and they lose their luster at some point. Then I move on to something else. But it's okay. If the good book talks about the fact that for everything there's a time and a season. And so to get engaged, and I like the idea of starting things fresh and starting them beginning with the end in mind. Because many of the associations, organizations, communities, companies, many things that I've gotten involved in from a safety perspective were not built for me, by me, or with anything about me considered at all. They were because I wasn't in the room when they started. And the folks who were in that room at the time thought very narrowly about, so there's 5 of us, what do we want? And what I've observed, observing some of the startup of the community, is that it has started with this, we're safety people, safety interested people. Where are we going? We're not totally sure, but we want it to be a safe space to be able to do it. And it stops there. As opposed to it's going to be this, and it's going to be a bunch of rules and regulations and that. We've got plenty of rules and policies, and back to your point, we can all find an OSH regulation or something from the WHO. We can find a policy for everything. What we're missing often is just the humanness that says we're not totally sure about where this is going, but does it feel safe while we're doing it? And if it does, let's do a little bit more of it until it starts to feel unsafe to us, or until we recognize a hazard in front of us, and not feel like that. It's not a police state. It's not an auditor. A dictatorial type. It's not that. It's a place for people to hang out, really, with other similarly, not identically minded. That's the other part. Don't have to be identically minded, but similarly minded. What's the deal? Safety. We do safety here. And so again, I just kind of like the concept, like the idea, and certainly, honored to be able to have some conversations with you all about the topic. So as we start to wrap this, I think there was a mention that, Safety Connect version 3 or version 4 actually for 2023, as this podcast is released, it's coming up next week. So folks have an opportunity to take a look and come to some of the presentations, including one I'll be doing, that I think you'd certainly benefit. But if folks want to learn more about the community, about Safeopedia, about, some of the discussions that we've been having, Jamie, what would you suggest to people who just want to find out a little bit more?
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you, David, for having us on. That's for sure. Yeah, we're getting close. I would say safetyconnect2023.com would be probably the best place to find out about Safety Connect. And at Safety Connect will be the place to find out about the community. That's the official launch. We're close enough now that it's not a secret, or probably not a secret, but the official launch will be at Safety Connect. And I don't want to jump on Scott's thunder here, but David, you hit something that we haven't really talked about the community, and that's we're all similar minded, and one of the things that's really surprised me the most is, we've had all these as we're getting the community going, and I don't know if this is Scott's idea or not. I'm going to say it was my idea. So
There you go.
this was, I'm sure it wasn't, but the idea to have founding members be a part of the community to help decide what goes on in the community and how the community happens, and trying to get, while similar minded folks, different perspectives. And from the onset, that's been the goal, is to really have that inclusiveness and diversity in the community from all aspects of diversity. And the thing that, and you joked the other day on a call, David, but the thing that surprised me the most and excites me the most is, Scott and I put together an agenda, and this is how we're going to roll, and this is our meetings, and we've got it all planned out over the next, 8 weeks. And honestly, in meeting number 1, the meeting went so awesome and so off the rails from what we thought was going to happen. And Scott and I met after, and we were like, well, that genie's out of the lamp. And it was awesome. The community, you guys took full control, and I'll use that word loosely, but that was the best thing that ever could have happened. So, it isn't the Scott and Jamie show rolling out a community. We're almost relegated to the background, dealing with the tech and trying to make sure that what you all as the founding member group decide gets rolled into there. So it's been quite an experience, and thanks for just making it like that. So
Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you did steal the thunder, but I'm glad you jumped on that. And I did want to mention that we do have, we have the idea for the community, but it's there to serve the people. And so we got the founding members together, and we're fortunate enough to have David as one of the founding members. And we got together that first meeting, and we're like, okay, well, let's talk about code of conduct, right? And I think David and some others were like, well, what are our core values? Before we start talking about how we're going to conduct ourselves, what are our core values? And I think, David, you asked, like, what kind of community do we want to be, right? Like, let's define that, before we start talking about the tags in the forum, or what groups we should set up. It's like, who do we want to be when we grow up? And so, yeah, just like Jamie said, I think that it's not, it is called the Safeopedia Community, but it's really the community for anybody who wants to jump in and participate and contribute. And we don't have any predefined ideas or mandates. We just want it to be a place where people come together, support each other, share, make the industry better. And I think it's jumping around a little bit, but one thing that keeps popping into my head as we're talking is about health and safety. And David, you talked about you can't take your money with you when you're gone, and you mentioned, if you get seriously injured, then there's no money that can help that. And I think that health comes before safety, because if we aren't healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, then we can't be safe. And so again, I'm using up our last few minutes, to get on my soapbox. But I think if we look at a lot of these industries where we have trades, being somebody who wasn't successful in school, you get pushed in that direction, right? And I think that we're pushing people who have anxiety, who have issues that aren't achieving academic success, and we're kind of shuffling them off into some industries where it's like, oh, don't worry, we won't address what's the real problem is. We're just gonna push you into an industry that will be accepting of you if you're not getting A's in calculus. And I think that, and then we kind of turned a blind eye, and we talked about the scenarios on the site. So I think that bringing this health, psychological health, mental health, to the forefront is extremely important, because the PPE will keep us physically safe, but if we're not mentally healthy, then we can't be safe. So.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, Jamie, thanks to both of you for spending some time with me to chat about this really important effort that you've launched. If you're watching this episode on the Flourish DX YouTube page, please do like, subscribe, share with your friends. If you're watching or listening to the podcast for the first time, welcome. Hopefully something that you have heard or seen is going to encourage you to come back and see us again in the future. If you'd like to check out previous episodes of the podcast, they can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. And we'd love for you to become a part of the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting to us on LinkedIn. And there are lots and lots and lots of great things that are going on in the extension of the community who is interested in psychological health and safety here in the United States. And that's it. We're going to wrap it up right there and look forward to our next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Thanks a lot.
Tune in each Friday for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.